that every second you're getting the exact dosage. And so therefore it becomes very important that those instruments are calibrated. So these are the types of calibrations that we allow, or we enable, or we can provide to industry, be it hospitals or other institutes. If we look at gas under industry and local export, if we look at gas standards or environmental monitoring, we provide the air monitoring stations with the primary reference gas mixtures. So that allows them to actually test the accurate measurements of pollution, or in terms of quality, air quality that you have. So there's just a few examples, and like I said, you can read around the screen there, in terms of what it is that we offer and how we translate our services to the local economy. So let me just go. What is this? Okay, so in terms of the economic development now, and this is bringing it more closer to this quarter. So the economic development in this quarter, in terms of supporting and exporting for trade facilitation, NMISA supported laboratories in over 25 countries through proficiency testings. And this is, again, a contribution to the AFCFTA. In what we've been saying through the DTIC presentations over the last few months as well, and making those grounds. So we're contracted with 8 countries, and you'll see this now as well when I do an overview in terms of where our revenue has also been coming from. So if we also look at agro-processing and food exports, we provide the certified reference materials there to help with in terms of testings for mycotoxins, pesticides. So it's, again, it's that golden ruler. So we provide you with that reference point so you can test against to see if, your food products are good or not so good. Green industrialization, again, this is that move towards the decarbonization aspect of the DTIC that you've been hearing about. And I mentioned now in terms of gas monitoring or air quality monitoring, sorry. So another example actually of some of the significance, and if I can just quickly go back and cast your eye here, if you look under public, and if you look at the one under methane poisoning investigation. So that was the work that we did actually for Enyobeni, with those teenagers in the taverns. So we were actually able to help them determine the methane poisoning. So and there's plenty of other examples. If I look at Caltrain and helping them with their gear knobs so that they can create efficiency. But coming back here, because that brought me back to the green industrialization aspect. The infrastructure and industry support, you can see again in terms of NMISA assisting the rail, healthcare, nuclear, in terms of failure analysis. We've also recently collaborated with Mintech, and this is for the work on the critical minerals. So we've signed a letter of intent to work with them there. And then lastly, the digital innovation, and this talks now to the digitalization aspect. You would have been hearing of on the DTIC, and you can see, the move towards the 3Ds, the digital innovation and efficiency. And we heard what the parliamentary committee had said at the last meeting as well. Don't just let it be for in-house, but see how you translate this to the local economy. So in this particular example, or what we've done over the last year, is we've created indicators for our fridges, because we keep a lot of primary reference materials for especially food testing, and they've got to be obviously at a certain temperature. Now, we've got indicators, especially with all this load shedding, and even though we have backup, but we've created indicators, sensors that then allow us to get a notification when the temperature drops to a certain temperature, and then it'll notify our scientists. So even like I said, you do have the backup, but it allows them then to come onto site, and we can make alternative arrangements. And this allows us to save, quite a bit of product and investment time as well into creating this. So in terms of rolling this out to the local economy, this is something we can actually, now that we know we've piloted it in-house, we can help other labs as well with these types of detectors that gives you on your phone notifications. So yeah, again, we take heed of what was told to us. Now, if I look at the likes of diverse, so I've discussed briefly in terms of decarbonization, digitalization. If I look at diversification and expanding South Africa's industrial base, if you look at the first three elements of um, export growth, food sector, manufacturing support. Now, why I mention this is that most of the examples that you would have seen there come from the base, which is these KPIs 1 to 4. So everything that we then do is based on this. So when you see, or you would see in our KPIs, interlab comparisons or SI base units or new measurement systems or metrological services covered. This 1, 2, 3, and 4 is what forms the core of allowing us now to create those golden rulers, so to speak. If we didn't do the interlab comparisons, we wouldn't be able to see if we're obviously internationally comparable. If you can then take the same product here and it will be equivalent if you go anywhere else in the world. The base units, all these SI units, we've got to ensure that we then maintain these golden standards. So by being able to do 1, 2, 3, and 4, we can then provide the services that I've just mentioned to you in that circle, in that wheel, in terms of all the different elements. And this talks to the diversification aspect of what we do. Collaborative agreements under KPI 11 and 12 as well, then talk to the SMMEs and the SEZ compliance. And I thought I'd just highlight that part under here as well. Okay, so now we get to the performance against target. So, in terms of what we do, yes, we've now set that, and I hope I've done a good job in presenting that as well. So we've achieved 81% in terms of our target. 17 were achieved, 4 were not achieved. And I apologize for that blue arrow hitting the bullseye. Should have probably been way out to the left or maybe the right. No, I will address that because it's definitely not hitting the bullseye. NMISA's performance against the target. So the 96% is the audit non-conformances. We've pulled that up. If you've seen in the previous quarters from the 70%. So we worked quite hard in bringing that to the 96. It's very unfortunate that there were a few of those that we could not close in time, which left us 4% short of the target. I will address the in-service trainees and the staff turnaround time, but let me get to the staff turnover rate, but the turnaround time at 61%. This was a new indicator. Maybe I start there. And I think what I need to then talk about here first, before the explanation on this, is that NMISA only received 3 complaints, which they've closed throughout the year from clients. And you will see now also in terms of client satisfaction that NMISA has also been providing really good client satisfaction because we've met that target. And like I said, this was a new target we were trying out, and which is very unfortunate because the measurement actually, which is ironic because we're a measurement institute, the measurement of this could have probably been captured more, could have been captured in a better way. So when a product comes into the house, work is done, but then sometimes it has to go back to the client. We could have paused the time in which we've been holding that, but it continues, and sometimes the client holds it, or sometimes you get there's an inquiry, and then the tracker starts based on when a quotation is then submitted, but yet the product is not in house. So we've worked on this in terms of improving that, but improving the process, the turnaround time itself. Like I said, that's why I indicated there's only been 3 client complaints. You would see that in terms also of the work output that has been completed, it's on par with previous years, especially with revenue generation services that have been offered as well, and also the client satisfaction rate. So if I can move to that, maybe we talk about then the exceeded, and this is not forgetting the other 2. I'll get to those now. Exceeded expectations of 11 of our targets. So again, I've mentioned that KPIs 2, 3, and 4 as well as 12. I spoke about some of those. Client retention over 2 years is 70%. And um, we achieved 74%. And over here, it would be great sometimes to achieve 100%. But they in terms of pricing, there's different elements, let's say, why clients leave. But um, I can say, like I said, if we track in terms of the satisfaction or their complaints, it's never been something that has not been addressed, that clients don't come back. So we also have KPI 19 with new collaborative agreements. We've exceeded there. And I think the ones that I want to talk about maybe more specifically is the visibility. So we've increased this, and we continue to increase awareness and visibility of what it is we're doing. Our social platforms have grown by more than 100% over the last two years or 3 years. So, it's definitely we're definitely moving the needle in terms of awareness and allowing people to actually see what it is that we do. So the revenue target we've exceeded as well, and we've also managed to diversify some of our revenue streams in terms of what we set out to achieve at the beginning of the year. Further six targets that we achieved would be for looking at collaborative agreements, some of the outreaches, and the KPI satisfaction scores 9, and also for training 11. I think those are the two that I wanted to bring your attention to. 88% and 89% in terms of the achievement there. So we continue to ensure that our clients receive a satisfactory service from ourselves. This is just the revenue scale or bar graph in terms of the last, what is it, 6, 7 years? And you can see that if you just cast your eye over it and look at a trend line, so to speak, you'll be able to see that, in terms of our performance, it's reaching a sense of a plateau, or where some of these numbers come from is also important. And these are the institutes that we service, be it government, be it commercial labs. Commercial labs, you'll see a big one there, and I'll talk to that towards the latter part of the presentation. Services broken down, we offer calibration, be it reference materials, training and consulting. You'd see that is we've really moved up on training and consulting, on 3.8 million. Our training facility is really starting to take in a lot of more business than it previously was taking in. This is good and bad. Good in that we are obviously, and a lot of training that's being done in the region. So yes, you don't want to be the strongest chess player and then play again with everyone else, and you got nobody that's on the same path. So you want to have these relationships, and then again, it talks to the AFCTA in terms of those agreements. So yes, that's very good. Training internationally, we got to be mindful on that front in terms of our IP as well. So while we're trying to make revenue, we try to balance in terms of what it is that we offer, and training and consulting is becoming a big part of it, to create that revenue, which is drifting us away from the mandate of those 1, 2, 3, and 4 that I've referenced right at the start. So here is, what a lot of questions have been coming off recent in terms of the staff turnover rate, and we can add the number of interns, albeit that we've missed that by 1, but it still is a recruitment element. And the actual achievement was 16%, where we've set out at 7%. So this one, I think we really need to address in detail and see where we are at. And I think I've put a few slides here to talk us through this, because, like I said, this was a very continuous discussion over recent presentations, even following from last year. Now, this is when I say board sanction. So initially we had the so the board was approving those positions. But I think in totality, if we just look at this in totality, the number of positions that have been available or were available or that were not filled, there was, if you add that, I think it's about 32, of which 11 are technical positions. So I want to first set that stall out to say 11 of these are technical positions. Now, a quick update in terms of those positions, and I think maybe let's just get that also sorted out. Uh, Maybe before I get there. So in terms of the recruitment and this vacancy, and like I say, it's a twofold element. So the first being that, it's colleagues are leaving the organization. So we wanted to investigate. We wanted to know what's actually going on. What we did was we did an employee engagement um, survey, and we looked at what is it that's concerning. Why are people leaving? And again, I will get back to the recruitment element of. So let's unpack this first with why people are leaving. So we ran this employee engagement and retention to understand what it is that colleagues, and you can see this graph on your left-hand side as well, through the years. And it makes us probably appreciate the fact when I showed the revenue bar graphs and that line, that trend line still being standard in terms of what it is, with the people even leaving over the years, or number of people being reduced. We probably appreciate that bar graph then in terms of what the achievements were, especially with the 81%. We looked at engagement factors, non-financial incentives, and job satisfaction improvements. And what we found was that 50% took part in the survey, and of the 50%, 56% said they're most likely to leave. And so that's about close on to 25% of the organization. So while our staff turnover rate is at 16, more likely that it might increase. So we wanted to act quickly. We have been acting now, and to try and limit this loss. So from the surveys and from what we've been receiving from the feedback, we looked at what is being said, effective communication. And I think this is the cornerstone of any element or any institute, is to have those effective communications. And I'll talk now in terms of communications and some of these elements we've put in place. Limited monetary incentives, and people were talking about, they want these flexi working arrangements, they want a work-life balance, they want social interactions. And this is something we're also working on, career growth initiatives. So you want to see some sort of trajectory where you're coming into the organization, something's been mapped out for you. But we also got to be mindful of the threat, which is the budget constraints. And this in terms of what we can afford, especially when colleagues are asking for performance bonuses, because we haven't, I think, given that over the last 2 or 3 years. And if you look at cost of living, we did a cost of living, I think, this year, but not last year, and this was more. It was also engagements with the union there on that front. So I think what is important to understand is that we have lost a lot of revenue over the last 4 years, and this is close on to 100 million in terms of what our decline has been. So in terms of our affordability, we have to manage that, and we do try to motivate, and that's why I say, I really must commend the teams at NMISA in achieving the achievements, albeit without those performance bonuses or incentives that come along with high achievements. I did mention that, so talking about leadership and how we've addressed this. So we've engaged the DTIC, and again, I'll talk to that towards the latter part of the presentation as well. And they've been really assisting us on that front. So we looked at how we can improve, and we've put through some of these elements, or looked at some strategies on how we can achieve more funds and look at boosting that. So from a funding engagement perspective, we've improved in terms of our SCMs and procurement updates. So what we found is that with staff in-house, having these difficulties, I've mentioned to you about the employee compensation adjustments now, where we've engaged the unions and we've closed in terms of an we've closed on an agreed what do you call it? The cost of living increase. And again, like I said, there were some DTI strategic considerations. We've also looked at discussions with CSIR for the facilities, the rental updates, and having those discussions as well in terms of some negotiations there. Now, another element, and like I said, it's not just that, but we also put together a continuity strategy. So we've drafted this. So these are all the elements of how we're going to look at retaining now the staff. So it's not just to say, okay, fine, we can't um, just look at it from one dimensional. And so we put together this entire strategy. I'm not going to go through all those green bars, but just to look at critical function identification. So as opposed to looking just at succession strategy, and we don't have the funds to bring in somebody who will, shadow the CFO until he leaves, for example. So we have to look at a continuity. How can we also move and ensure that our resources have interdisciplinary skills? So that's what we're looking at in terms of the continuity framework, where we talk about knowledge capture and transfer, cross-training and skills clustering, forming this other unit in-house, which serves as a continuity engine, so to speak. So these are just elements, and we've drafted a proposal and a full strategy document on the succession and continuity framework. And this is just to boost the organization's resilience in terms of what do you call it? Staff turnover. So I think that I'm just going to quickly go back to this element here. Yes. So this now, not to take away, because I said right at the beginning of when I started here that we've made some inroads here. And I think what becomes important is to just quickly indicate. So, like I said, 11 were technical, and then you've got the remaining that are support staff. Now, to date, I can say to date that of the 11 positions that are there, so we've got somewhere scientist in dosimetry, we've got junior scientist dosimetry, internal dosimetry. So those positions, there's already so interviews have been conducted. The start date has then been set for the 1st of July. Sometimes you get closer to 400, 500 CVs. And what we also identified was that there was a manual process going on in HR. And this is a team of 3 people. So imagine, they're looking through these CVs on a daily basis, which doesn't help. So now we said, we're going to implement AI to at least assist with the shortlisting, and we can run through it. So we're actually speeding up then that shortlisting process, which we found to be a bit of a bottleneck. And at other positions, for example, the scientist for force torque hardness starting on the 1st of July, scientist for pressure, vacuum, and flow. I'm sorry, I'm just reading this off the side. 1st of July, I can share this with the colleagues. Then there's a SHEC administrator, 1st of June. So of these positions, almost 50% of these positions have already been, we've moved through the interview process. We've done the shortlisting, we moved through the interview process, and now we're bringing people into the organization to fill these positions. The other remaining positions, we know now that we can go through the shortlisting at a very quicker rate, which then allows us maybe by June, July, what's July? August. By around August or so, we should start to fill that. So I think the problem or the concern that we used to have is that people's leaving. And if you look at, like I say, this indicator, people leaving, and then you still got people that have left, and that continues to create the cycle. So we had to close that loop very quickly. So therefore, we said, something like AI to help with that. We identified being where the bottleneck was to speed up that process. So that was phase 1. The next phase, obviously, being to identify what is it that's a concern, addressing elements like leadership, communication, and also looking at succession and continuity and how we can form interdisciplinary skills among the people so that they can move between positions, and it doesn't create those gaps going forward. We looked at an overview plan in terms of relieving some of the systemic pressures. Um, or the organogram for the organization is one of the main ones that we're looking at over the next in the short term, up until well the next 3 months or so. I've mentioned about the addressing the exit or interviews. We've done looked at that as well. We've compared that to the return to that survey, and we've seen common threads there. So therefore, we were able to put some of these interventions in place to try and address that over the last 2 to 3 months or so. We've also looked at aligning scorecards of the executive with HR KPIs. This allows us then, to ensure that we don't find ourselves in this kind of situations going forward. But you can look at, I think, just overview in terms of some of the things that we are looking at. And then finally, towards the latter part, at least um, becoming more stable in terms of our financial situation, looking at competitive salary benchmarking exercises, um, and those kind of elements. So I think then if we come to the financial elements, and if we look at, and I've been indicating, I think you've seen now that graph, but what you find is that also the OpEx is quickly catching in terms of the budget that we have. Some of the high elements there in terms of rental, employee costs as well, but you know we have looked at, and therefore I said at this point here, finalizing the organogram, because we've actually looked at our top structure, cutting it almost by 50%. So that becomes a key aspect as well when we're looking at our funds that are available. Okay, you've seen this. Now to talk quickly through the management accounts in terms of the year ending at the end of March. I mentioned about the external revenue. That's the amount that you'll see in the annual report of 25. Uh, that's I speak, yes, 25,961,000. The CFO will come in a bit to correct me if there's been any minute changes, but more or less along those lines. So there's been some interest from investments that we've also managed to build up, as well as some other income. And our total there was 35 million, inclusive of the grant that we received over the last year, which is 177 million. Employee costs, the actual was 102 million. And this bearing in mind as well some of the positions that we've not filled. So what else do we have there? Gratuity, that was part of the agreement with the union in terms of settlement on those negotiations. And that was for levels 1 to 12 in terms of the gratuity payment. Temporary employees, again, this would be more also along the lines of your acting allowance, acting positions as well. And this would then talk to what I've just shown you in terms of those available positions. And then the board members in terms of the funds there. And yeah, you see the total expenses versus what was budgeted for. This is our budget then for the projected next financial year, 25-26. Our grant allocation, as I mentioned, down to 165. So, to make up the shortfall of what the expenses is, you'd see that now we're looking at 23 million. And that's also with an interest amount, they have 6 million. But you can look at some of, so the IT ones is mostly those IT, what do you call those things? IT license agreements. And then the operating leases is our rental element, and that's the one that we want to really have those strong discussions with the CSIR with in terms of some of the space, and maybe tie that in with the likes of the flexibility in working arrangements that has also come through from employees to create a bit more satisfaction and thus retention along the staff. Okay, so again, so I think this part is what I wanted to really get to. So one could always argue and say, "Oh, but you guys can go make more, go and start making more money," and all good and well, and we definitely do that. But in terms of how we've been set up as a metrology institute, and it's no different to a lot of the metrology institutes worldwide in terms of the metrology functions being decentralized. Well, apart from China, China holds the entire thing in their government itself. But other countries like the UK, USA, and like I said, mostly throughout the world, it's decentralized. So, you provide the service and then you provide to the labs. And you would have seen one of those slides where I spoke about and I said that, yeah, we give it or we so think it was the one where that cycle was that wheel. And I spoke to her and I said, there's a big portion that goes to laboratory or calibration testings for those labs. This is because it's decentralized. So we give the golden ruler to the likes of a lab and say, this is an equivalent golden ruler, use it, go and service the likes of Pick and Pay, Checkers, go and service uh, wherever other services are required that need this golden rulers, so to speak. And that allows for a boost in the economy. So if you look at the multiplier effect and what we provide, so while we may not show on a monthly basis or an annual basis, we're making millions and millions of money of rands, but by providing the support in terms of the multiplier, that allows industry, obviously, to calibrate instruments for the local economy, which then boosts the GDP, and it provides then jobs. It provides the economic growth that we speak of. So when we talk about the economic development, then we get this multiplier effect that comes in. And if you stop that, then it has a knock-on effect. And this type of loss in fundings does have, especially if we want to move from industry that's highly productive, where we're getting a boost in economy and improving efficiency, removing that kind of funds, it does damage the chain in terms of providing those services. And like I said, it is how we've been set up to provide. So we go now and start taking that job and saying to the labs, no, 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 we'll go and do Pick and Pay's testing of scales, for example, or Checkers testings of scale. There'd be a bit of kickback, because then it would be argued that we pay these taxes, government buys the instruments and then uses its own institute to then knock us out of the water. So in terms of providing that support, yes, we do it. What maybe we could do in going forward is to get the gains that those labs, are actually getting in terms of, be it people development, be it employment, be it turnover. If we can get those gains, then at least we can say, yes, we've given you a golden ruler, and this golden ruler, as a result of that, has brought about X, Y, and Z. And we can, say thankfully to us, as well as, the DTIC, for providing this. This is what has resulted. Because if that is the case and we remove the funding, some of these services then obviously start to go as well in terms of the OPEX. And you would have seen that green bar catching up very quickly. And I did mention right at the beginning that we've had these discussions now. We've had some very good discussions. The CFO of the DTIC has been coming through. The Honorable Deputy Minister Whitfield was leading that and has tasked that engagement to come through. We've spoke about the Cannabis Master Plan. We've contributed already over the last year to the Cannabis Master Plan. I've mentioned about trade facilitation, engaging on the AFCFTA front, green energy I've spoken about. So in the short term, in terms of the things that we're doing to at least help ourselves, we were there. And then we also discussed medium to long term. How can we then also, put ourselves in the picture? Some things like, assistance with the AIS, the automotive services, to get those calibrations, because we can do it. Why send it overseas? We can do it for you right here. And if a portion has been set aside, let's give that to NMISA. Then we're not asking, saying just give us that. We'll do the work for it. and then we can at least, boost ourselves, create more jobs to then get these services going. So those kind of things. If we look at, we've spoken about to insist on all these calibration services and funding and incentive programs. Those comes to NMISA, those kind of things. So those are discussions that it's been ongoing. We contributed, we gave, there's discussions about regulatory frameworks and how can we contribute. So we've given our input on that front as well. We've also discussed or just given an overview in terms of the National Treasury. And again, these are just suggestions that we would have put forward, or we've put forward in a presentation like this, should I say. So one idea being, maybe if you look at tenders, instead of when tenders have been awarded, maybe put that portion aside. This is for NMISA. So it's not coming back to NMISA via a third party, and then the price being really, going up more than NMISA would charge if it's getting a direct source. So just a few ideas like that in terms of what or how we can see ourselves assisting ourselves through the DTIC and also boosting ourselves. Thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate your time. I think that's it. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, CEO. Are there any additions?
I'm not sure if the CFO would like to say anything.
Over to you, CFO. If there's anything you just want to add briefly.
No, thank you, Chair. It is your covered adequately.
Okay, thank you very much. Andre, you'll also help me with hands so that I can see all the colleagues.
No problem, Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chance, Chair.
Member Chance, yeah, the first. Three hands, maybe.
Mr. Thring.
Member Thring, you're second.
Mr. Langa.
Mr. Langa, number three. Okay, thank you very much. Let's start.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Pillay, for your presentation this morning. Obviously it's an organization which is under stress. No question about that. And I did pay a visit to NMISA when your predecessor, Jane DeFoss, was the acting CEO. I had a good look around your premises, and obviously there are some very dedicated and highly skilled scientists and technical people, which are the backbone of your organization. So I can understand why the vacancy rate is a real problem. Just one thing I couldn't quite figure out was on one of your earlier slides, you talked about staff turnover of 44%. There was a figure of 44% somewhere. Now, then you said it was 16%. So maybe you could just clarify what that 44% refers to. And the factors that you looked at in your SWOT analysis obviously indicate disincentives to stick around. When 25% of your staff want to leave, it's a big problem. So I'm not sure that the answers that you provided are totally satisfactory, really, because it doesn't really indicate a change in that. And I was just wondering whether there are other factors which go to the issue of, does the department actually come across as being supportive ultimately of what this organization does and what it needs to do to turn itself around. I was very interested to see the benchmarking slide where you looked at your counterparts in other parts of the world, which, from what you say, seem to be mostly completely state funded. And I guess, your income is 80% state funded as well. So do any of these organizations do any of the revenue generating activities that you yourself do? But I think what the question that I'm posing, and it's more actually posed at the DTIC as from a policy perspective, I'm not sure that we're going to get the answers to that today, is the question of the multiplier effect, which is absolutely critical to the technical institutions, because these technical institutions are not revenue generators per se. What they're doing is that they're providing the the underpinning, the technical underpinning of a successful modern economy, which allows businesses and institutions to service their customers. So I think that what has to happen is that the department needs to undertake a much more comprehensive analysis of the multiplier effect. And so, for example, for every 10 million rand that is spent on incentives, and bear in mind that incentives represent 50% or just about 50% of the DCIC's budget, 500 million rand, 5 billion rand spent on incentives, which is essentially money dished out by the DCIC to businesses to help them grow and develop. What is the multiplier of that money compared to the multiplier that is achieved by efficient provision of services by NMISA and the other technical institutions? So I'm looking at the DCIC at this, for this particular question, and I think that it's very important that as you look at your long-term planning, you cannot accept that the deterioration of the services provided by these technical institutions can continue, whilst at the same time saying that you are trying to have a competitive organization that is internationally competitive. So that's really all I have to say at this point, Chair. Just one other thing. I'm interested to know what you were doing with the cannabis master plan, because cannabis master plan seems to have stalled, and I have actually asked the chair to put it onto our agenda as a committee, because it's an industry which has huge potential and which has not really been properly exploited. And there are lots of problems in terms of misalignment of different departments' objectives and strategies, which have held this whole industry up. I'd like to get your comments on that, please. Thank you very much.
Member, Honorable Langa, and then you'll be followed by Member Tring.
Thank you very much, Chair, and greetings to you and fellow committee members and NMISA leadership and our support staff. Let me also welcome the presentation by Mr. Pillay. However, I'm not sure if it was just myself. Somehow, Mr. Pillay felt like he didn't own this presentation, if you know what I'm trying to say. He somehow seemed to be, I don't want to say all over the place, but somehow I will get lost, while he was still making the presentation. But like I said, I thought maybe it's because of the time constraints. Having said that, Chair, I welcome the presentation anyway. Maybe to go shoot straight to my questions. On the slide that spoke on strategic objective 4, given the NMISA strategic objective to develop and retain a capable workforce, and the fact that only 5 out of the targeted 6 interns were hosted by Q4, what systemic challenges are hindering the recruitment and hosting of interns despite approval being granted as early as October 2024? And how does this shortfall affect the future skills pipeline for South Africa's metrology sector? And what concrete steps are being implemented to ensure smoother alignment between approval recruitment and onboarding processes? On the slide that spoke on HR KPI targets and versus achievements, with the with a staff turnover rate more than double target, what are the root causes identified through exit interviews and internal feedback loops? And how does this turnover affect NMISA ability to maintain and advance national measurement standards? And what indicators will be used to monitor the effectiveness of the new retention strategies beyond traditional monetary incentives? And then on the slide, let's focus on succession and continuity strategy. The shift away from traditional succession planning towards a continuity framework is both innovative and necessary. So given the current, rather the shift away from traditional succession planning towards a continuity framework is both innovative and necessary given the current resource constraints. Now, how will NMISA quantify the success of this model, particularly in high-risk technical areas where personnel hold exclusive knowledge or signatory authority on a national standard? Is there a risk that institutional memory could still be lost if key knowledge transfers interventions like video training, modular SOPs, and monitoring are delayed or underfunded? Then on the slide, let's focus on revenue target KPI 5 and 6, which was management accounts year ending 2024-2025. While it is commendable that NIMS has exceeded its revenue target and achieved diversification, 5.6% versus target of 5%, could NIMSA provide a breakdown of the new revenue streams that contributed to this performance? More importantly, to what extent are these streams sustainable and aligned with NIMSA's long-term strategic priorities, particularly in the context of public service delivery versus commercial mandates? Then on the slide, let's focus on metrology services overview. Given the extensive scope of NIMSA's services, from forensic calibration and emissions monitoring to agricultural testing and medical radiation safety, how does NIMSA prioritize its activities under constrained budget? Is there a national framework or risk-based model guiding which sectors receive priority support, particularly in relation to public health, industrial competitiveness, and environmental protection? And the last one is on the slide that spoke on succession and continuity strategy. The strategy, or rather the continuity strategy, mentions hosting a national and regional metrology skills forum and forging partnerships with academic institutions. What progress has been made on these initiatives to date, and how will they directly contribute to filling high risks, succession gaps, and fostering long-term capability in South Africa's metrology sector? Thank you very much, Chair.
Chair, can I
Thank you
proceed?
very much, Chair. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 3.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, let me also firstly appreciate the presentation and then go straight into my questions. Noting that I think with regards to SMMEs, and slide 6 speaks to services, metrology services to SMMEs. At SMMEs currently we are looking at contribution of about 40% to GDP. SMMEs contribute some 60% of our workforce in terms of employment. So the role of SMMEs in South Africa is actually crucial. I think including the role of SMMEs in growing our industrial base, which also has been shrinking particularly over the last decade or so. But the question here is, what percentages of your services, the metrology services, goes to supporting SMMEs. And while I've noticed that you've indicated that there is a support to SMMEs, but what percentage of your services goes to SMMEs? And then also slide 6, under industry and local export, you mentioned the focus on export quality assurance, and I think certainly that is needed. That the goods that we export out of South Africa need to be of the highest quality possible. But is there any role that you actually have in import quality assurance? Clearly, I think that if we are wanting to ensure that the quality of goods going out of South Africa is of a high standard, one would expect the same. And what is your role, if any, in import quality assurance? We've also noted, thirdly, Chair, we've also noted, and I think all members would know the fact that we've also had children that have been poisoned as a result of food that has been compromised, and resulting in the death and injury of many children in South Africa. And so within the standards, you're able to detect microscopic organisms, pesticides, and so on within food products. And what has been your role in preventing our children in particular and certain food products from being compromised in terms of the health standards in South Africa? Then coming to the financial aspects of the presentation, slide 22, we see the decline of close on to 100 million, and that was mentioned by Mr. Play in the presentation. So there's a decline of close on to 100 million over the last 5 years. And I think it may have been also asked by my previous colleagues, but let me also add my question or add to that. But what are the details of improving your revenue? Noting that most of your revenue is coming from disbursements from the department. And then I see that there is an acronym there, RIPO or RIPO, as a continuity engine. I'm just not sure what that is. So just if you could unpack what RIPO is as a continuity engine. And then my second to last question, Chair, has to do with capital and operational expenditure. So I think OPEX essentially focuses on maintenance and maintenance of operations, while CapEx can be seen to be as more, expansionist, investing in infrastructure and so on. But in the presentation, we've seen that your operational expenditure has increased from just over 100 million rand in 2024 to about 170 million rand in 2025. Now, why is that? I know that you spoke about there were no salary increases for the last couple of years, and you've reached agreements with the unions. And so is that agreement with the unions that has been reached, does that equate to that 70 million increase in operational expenditure for 2025? So if you could speak to that huge increase in operational expenditure. And then my final question is, could you speak to your relationship with SABS and NRCS in the setting of and the work that you do? What relationship is there with organizations like SABS and NRCS and other like-minded organizations? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Andre, are there no further hands?
No further hands at the moment, Chair.
Okay, I think the question of staff turnover and the reasons. It's a main issue that is being asked. Secondly, we have had a very disturbing situation at SABS where you have technical staff literally opening their own SABS outside of the SABS, causing enormous harm to the institution of SABS. Do you get a sense that those that are resigning, those with technical skills that are resigning, are probably doing something similar to dislodge the work of the NMISA? And the last question from Mr. Tring, I think, is very important. What is the linkage of the three institutions that are doing standard measurements and all that? How do you relate? And the last on my side, I think, it's just a special, whether or not in terms of your business expansion strategy, you've reached out to the current days and over concert days, like the government has shifted in terms of its approach to spaza shops. What is your role there that you that is assumed, and are you able to expand to the committee in terms of whether or not you are in touch with them, and if not, is the appetite and capacity on your side to literally intervene so that we can prevent this unnecessary death? I think if you can just take the committee through on all those issues, then we'll be able to conclude the meeting. Over to you, CEO and CFO.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you to the chair. Thank you to the members for the questions. I think a few of those questions towards the latter part from the chair itself, I'll request also the CFO to come in on that front. But maybe let me start then with member Chance in terms of the first question that was put forward. And I apologize because what I thought I'd do there in terms of that 44% that you would have seen in the screen, and it didn't occur to me until now, is that I thought I'd do the percentage so that it's out of 100, because we were looking at the staff vacancy rate, because the rate is 16%. So how that was measured is in terms of the number that's left. So I thought in terms of, because of that bar graph, to invert it, so to get the inverse, if that makes sense. Looking at what the 16% actually is out of 100%. So therefore, that translation worked out to a 44%. I hope that explains it and makes sense, and probably something to be mindful of in the future. In terms of the factors for the SWOT analysis, and I think let me maybe I'll just open it on my side so that I can refer to where is this thing? Okay. So yes, so the factors that have been indicated there. So we spoke about effective communication, career growth, incentives. Effective communication, again, was one of the critical ones, and we've put together, so I didn't go into the details, but through our management structure, we've put together an open line, or so to speak, where we've now said, and I've tied this into when I indicated with making Exco have those, what do you call it? KPIs or 360s in their planning. So from any meetings, whether even a meeting and engagement of this sort, it then gets channeled with the Exco, then gets channeled with the senior managers. That then must then go, because we want the staff informed at all times. And it seems to be something that, the staff want to be know-how, and we want to share that knowledge. It's not just running ahead and forgetting to inform people what's actually going on. So we've made this a priority now. When you're having those divisional meetings, you'd inform the teams. And when you inform the teams, we want the feedback also coming back when then we meet in 2 weeks from then. So that continues. Then there's the staff meetings as well, so that people can ask any question, whatever it is. We then also have these types of surveys now that we want to put out, where it's completely anonymous. People can speak their minds, say whatever it is, so we can get those feedbacks. And it's more often than not, people being able to air those views that allows them, that feeling part of the system itself is what we found. So that was quite a big one. The career growth, I'm going to address this together with that question of the interns that came through, the 5 versus 6. So first things first on that 5 versus 6, because we've been having so many people leave the organization and trying to fill critical positions. And I've alluded to the fact that there's only 3 members in HR, and we were going through, should I say, a lot of physical shortlistings of CVs. If you look at sometimes, 400 or 500 CVs and having to go through that manually, it can take up a lot of time. So that was putting us obviously on the back foot in terms of the speed of the recruitment rate. Now, I've mentioned how we've addressed that with putting in the likes of AI to assist us in shortlisting, so that we've addressed on that front. And like I said, the 5 versus 6 is because then we were now looking at more critical positions. If we need an SCM manager, we need to jump to that to try and fill that gap, because you need those approvals going through. And but to address the question and tie this into the career growth, what we've now looked at is that in terms of moving through the channels of recruitment, we've got interns, we've got staff that we've given them bursaries, and now they go and do their work back. Now that system, that integration into NMISA, we're now moving through that a lot faster. So we're recruiting a lot more. So that pipeline, we've opened the spread. And the question was in terms of, what interventions. I think it was about with regards to how are we actually making this possible, or what was the case previously. So with the delegation of authority now that came through from the board and more recent this month, we've opened they've opened this up now, said, the EXCO members, the responsibility then sits there. So we're bringing in the interns, we're bringing in those ones that are finished. So that talks to that recruitment. You will find there's no way that we will miss the intern target going forward. So that one I can rest assured, I can tell you right now on record, there's no way that one we can miss again, because like I said, we've got those steps in place now to bring through the interns and the ones that have done work back, or the contract workers, because you've got this training on NMISA. So now it's easier to integrate you into the system. So I think, yes, let me leave that as that. Benchmarking. Yes, 80% is state funded, correct, or thereabouts. So I speak under correction, thereabouts. Let's just put it at thereabouts. And in terms of the international organizations, a small percentage, from my understanding, I speak under correction, and I can always provide a more clearer response through a communication in terms of what it is that they achieve. But yes, their funding is also predominantly state funding, and a small percentage from a revenue generation. So I think Member Chance was spot on the money there. With the master plan, and maybe let me address this. So I said, we've done some work on that front, and we've signed an agreement more recently with the Gauteng Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. And from the side of NMISA, what we'll be looking at there is to develop and provide, in terms of the reference materials. So that would be our involvement. We recently, so when I say we've just signed this agreement, this MOU or MOA, this was, I think, what month are we in now? May. So it was been in April or March, or thereabouts, towards the end of March, around April, somewhere around there, that we've just signed. So this is also to develop cannabis, essential oils, progressing product testing, So residue that's used in this as well, development of cannabis and agro-processing reference materials. So these are all the elements in terms of what we would be doing. And I can share this memorandum of agreement with the colleagues as well. So you can just have a look if need be in terms of what's our involvement and how we've proposed contributions to this field. Okay. So then if I can go on, I think I've covered all that, Mr. Thring, in terms of the question. So let me start with the presentation. This is very much my own presentation. I've presented this even at, so it's been additions. I've presented a part of this to staff. I've presented then the presentation also to
Chair, sorry, Chair, my apologies. He's made reference to me with regards to those questions. I think it was Honorable Langa who asked about the owning
sorry.
of. Yeah, I was
Well,
supposed
yeah,
to have come second, but I think the chair mixed up our positions, so maybe that's why you've done that.
Sorry, sir. Okay.
It wasn't me.
Okay, thank you. So then, yes, let me address those questions to him in terms of that. Yes, but I can assure you this I'm so passionate about this presentation and the work that's gone into it. But yes, moving forward, I think in terms of the staff turnover, so the exit interviews. This is something that I worked with actually with HR. So what we did was we took all the exit interviews, we used AI, we had it generate in terms of what the outcome was for key elements. We looked at that, cross-checked that with then the survey that we did. And therefore, from that, we were able to, so we've got the top, and I try to put that just basically on that SWOT analysis, just to look at the top hits by cross-referencing those two to look at where we actually need to position ourselves and work with the teams. And like I said, number one there, we looked at effective communication. The monetary incentives came out quite high. And again, therefore, we've started those engagements with DTIC has also appreciated that from our side, and that discussions for fundings or as well has come through in terms of boosting the to get more hands on deck. I've explained now some of the shortfalls, and we've addressed those shortfalls to boost the recruitment rate. So we're bringing in, and like I said, by June, a lot of people start. July, a lot of staff start. We've also then looked at bringing through the pipeline. So all of these, elements that we see that are coming through in terms of concerns, we've put through different things that we can look at how. Now we can probably see the effect of this in 2 months or 3 months from now. And then we run another survey to have a look and see, was that effective? How do people feel now? We've brought more hands on deck. We've brought in effective, we're communicating more. Yes, from the financial sides, we're still working on it, but we're showing some improvement of career growth. So all of the things that you've spoken to, we'll get an indication. And maybe if it's still then we'll get an indication of it's just purely money or not. But like Member Chan said as well, and he said he was there, the dedication of the teams, you got to take nothing away from how dedicated some of the staff are. So yes, I think when we run that survey, it would be good to report on that as well to show how these strategic interventions that have been put in place have materialized, should I say. So the next one I think was, if I look at how do we tend to manage the key knowledge transfer under the continuity plan? And that's actually very, very critical, very critical. And therefore, I was talking about interdisciplinary skills. So what we do now is we, even in the technical, so the CFO is here, and he is also looking at it from the financial teams, having people move around. But from the technical side, we want to do lateral moves. So and also when when colleagues are doing work back, so if they've been trained, so for example, in materials characterization, and we've got a good few cases, or success cases, should I say. Fortunately is one of them, one of our young scientists that have come through. She studied material science, and she looked at actually the material for your solar panels. And now she works in the organic chemistry side, looking at food. So she's got those interdisciplinary skills. We've got another young lady who's worked also in material science. She's now looking at working in the gas section. So those interdisciplinary skills becomes very important, and it also allows colleagues, to upskill themselves with having more, at their disposal in terms of what they can contribute to. So that way, it allows not just few people to have a few key bits and pieces of knowledge, but we promote the fact of the youth then coming through. And I say this because my mind now jumped also to today is the World Metrology Day at 10 o'clock, and there's a live streaming. So what we've now done as opposed to previously, so we've said now this year we want the young scientists to, because then the media is going to be there, going to be an interview. So we want our young scientists to actually be frontline, to be able to look at what's happened there. So again, this is talking to that career growth, talking to how we're actually looking at now grooming the young people coming through the ranks, so that we don't have only and the good thing about NMISA is that the mature older people are willing to share knowledge. They are sharing knowledge in terms of how to do things and assist. So that also becomes quite important. Let me move on and not take up too much time. So we spoke about the exceeding of looking at diversifying revenue channels. So with regards to the revenue channels itself, and I think in terms of this one, and I can provide to the committee a more concrete overview in terms of the exact amounts and where these ones went. But just speaking broadly, we were getting, and I think I mentioned this with training and development as well. So there was a lot of, so if it's a new institute, for example, as well, that have come in, that have provided a different platform, and based on how that compares to the percentage. So not just a small, if you give us something for 5,000, then that's now a new, we're not counting that. So it's got to be in relation to the percentage. And we listed that in the APP in terms of how we are going to measure that specifically. So we've aligned it to that. And from that, we looked at what it is now that we've actually retrieved. And we've seen that a lot more, and like I said, under training and development, different elements have come through, which we've been able to take as part of that. We have got new jobs that have come through from different sectors. We've taken that into consideration. But again, I can provide an overview of the exact amounts on that one for the different industries or institutions that have provided those funds. So then keep and maintain. I think I've addressed that, keep and maintain in terms of the concrete steps. If I can go to, how do we prioritize sectors in terms of the available budget? And you would have seen that wagon wheel that I'd put there, and I said, so there's certain ones, when I first when I spoke to the different KPIs, and I said KPI 1, 2, 3, and 4. So our mandate in terms of so we would prioritize based on our mandate first and foremost. So as long as we would have to adhere to that, what it is that we were set out to do, let us start there in terms of the budget. Then we can say, fine, we can move to different sectors. So more often than not, so for example, if training is not part of the piece, then we can move people away. We would say, okay, fine, that part we're we're not going to concentrate on. We're going to now concentrate on just developing. So we're going to start with just developing the standards. Then we give those to the calibration labs. So it's not so the public aspect of that wheel that you would have seen, where maybe the breadth analyzers would be one, would fall on the lower listing in terms of the mandates. So we'd look at the mandate and then prioritize from there in terms of what it is that we have to offer. Again, the CFO can add more in terms of that when he comes in as well, if there's something else that I may have missed out. Last question on this front, I think, was the succession and continuity. So this is a very, very, very good question. So looking at academic engagements, this question was also more recently raised at our technical committee, and Prof. Andy actually raised this question to look at. So we do work for, we provide a lot of services, especially under our materials characterization and our organic units. We provide a lot of work. We do a lot of work for academia. Now, what we're looking at is to create NMISA as a hub of sorts. And then you have these nodes, which are universities, which then allows that interrelationship to work even more freely. So this is the broader concept of what we're looking at and trying to implement. And again, this, like I said, this question was raised. It is something now that we want to actually look at implementing. And therefore I said, I think this goes a long way, because even at universities, when you study a degree, you study to become either a scientist or an engineer. Then when you get to the metrology aspect, comes about in learning the uncertainties, the deviations, to learning down to those fine details of what makes a difference of 10 parts per billion in air monitoring versus 8 parts per billion, for example, and those are based on regulations. So I think, to allow us to get to that level, it then becomes the training that's needed, which then helps if you have these relationships with the universities, which we do, because we also do a lot of bursa agreements where we've created work in terms of the project proposals, that when someone's finished, they can then come straight into NMISA and they can hit the floor running. So therefore, it's easier for us to open that pipeline, what I was referring to in terms of taking in, interns, or be it work back employees. So those plans are then on the way. Okay, so then we get to the next question, or so the next member. Sorry, and from now, not mistaken, Mr. Fring, it's the SMMEs and contributing to the GDP.
That's
And
correct.
yes, sir. Thank you. So SMMEs and contributing to the GDP, and the role of SMMEs, in terms of growing the industrial base. So what services do we support? So one of the ones that we looked at now, and we do support, but it's if I look at things like essential oils, for example, we would be the only service, the only calibrated lab, approved calibration lab, or lab that has been, accredited lab in the country to provide those types of services to the likes of those local producers. And again, it comes to, where are we positioned, and in terms of our offerings, and therefore we want to boost our awareness as well, to say, what, we're here. Bring it to us. If you're a tea producer in the Cape, do not send it overseas. We want it to come to us, so we can help you. And I think creating the awareness, and therefore, even when I pointed out and I said, one of the ones that I was happy about is that we are boosting our awareness. And we were a small institute of 120 people, but we've grown. If you look at our social media platform, which gives an indication, the following base has improved by close on to 150% over the last 2 to 3 years, and it's now starting, I see, to really pick up. So things like today, when they do the media coverage at the World Metrology Institute, and the message we're now trying, or we're presenting, is we're trying to talk. I think Mr. Gigaba mentioned it. speak at the last meeting, because I read the notes. Mm, don't we're trying, so when we present now, it's more, we want to present ourselves from an economic point of view, how we can contribute, so you see the real value in terms of, but not just speaking from a scientific perspective, which then we believe can create more awareness, because then there's more engagement in terms of what it is we offer. So we take heed of all the comments that have been given to us, and how we can improve, and we're trying to do so on that front. So yes, in terms of the GDPs and how we contribute, we do contribute in terms of SMMEs. I can give a breakdown in terms of that. We have those figures that we can present to you, but just know that we do provide support, but it's in pockets, as opposed to just being able to shoot out, this is a percentage. I can get those numbers for you, though. That wouldn't be too difficult for us. So I think in terms of so this was a good question as well. All are good questions. Industry and local export. So the export quality assurance, yes, we provide. So the import quality assurance. So this is the likes of the NRCS. So and again, maybe let me address the question on SARS, NRCS, and SANAS. So sorry, SABS, SABS, NRCS, and SANAS. So with the SABS, so SABS, for example, will give you the paper standard. So if we're looking at a bottle of water, I'm saying that because hold on. So they would say, right, this is the height we need it to be. The cap must be red. We need the opening to be a certain level. The color of the labeling must be this. We want the temperature for packaging to be at this. So they'll give you all the standards. Now, somebody's still got to go and do it. So we take the golden ruler, so to speak, and we now go and we ensure that this meets those required standards. So they cannot play player and referee. So therefore, we are now independent in terms of allowing or coming through and providing those measurements, those golden rulers from what they've derived on the paper. And then we can give this, then once we've got that as a measure of creating those golden rulers, we can now give it to the labs to say, when we say labs, these are calibration labs throughout the country that we then give to. And they then disseminate, they take that to the local industry. So it's, if we had the manpower, so if we brought, like we were China, we bring all those labs into NMISA, and then that just becomes us, then revenue you will never hear us even speak of revenue after that, because we control the system. But because we don't do that, we give then the local economy or the labs, the calibration labs, they then take that and then they move in terms of providing those services to the economy itself. The NRCS again would then come in. So for example, if we look at the breath analyzer, I'll give you maybe an example on that one. So they would have the legal metrology or the legal aspect in terms of what they would be governing. So we would provide the front in terms of the calibration of those devices to say, listen, it meets the specs of what is required. It meets if so we would do a equivalent testing of the breath ELISA in our labs to know that on those conditions or in those conditions, if it's being used, then it would meet the requirements that's been set out. NRCS is then the regulator. They will then ensure that it, going forward, that in terms of those regulations, or if products are coming into the country, they meet a certain standard on that front. SANAS is then the accreditation body, where they then come through to us and they would, like I said, I use the example of the essential oil. So they'll mark and they'll check, did you meet your, and therefore that non-conformances as well, you would have seen we reached 96%. We couldn't close it or meet the closing of that before the end of March. So they will tell you, what, can we accredit your lab? Has all your processes been in place? Has all your do you meet all the requirements that's required of 9001 or 17025? So those standards that have been set out, are you compliant? Are you adhering? I always maybe I should have put it, but I look at NMISA as the nucleus. You don't really see it. It's in the background, and all these other bodies are in the front. But without NMISA being able to do the calibration that's been set out by these paper standards, or without NMISA giving you the breath analyzer so you can move forward with regulations, without NMISA giving you a reference material so you can have something to test against, there's nothing that the other bodies then are able to manage if you take away that nucleus. It's the core function, it's the anchor behind everything that goes on, but it's so much in the background. It's unfortunate, because it's more of the enabling function that allows those around it to actually go out and spread their wings. So you might hear of, AFROX and all of the big institutes that are out there, but the calibration or the reference material is coming from somewhere. When you're buying something off the shelf, one way or the other, that has touched the hand, and NMISA has touched that product. So again, it's unfortunate that we play a role in the background, but if you take away that role, you'd see the impact then run through the economy very quickly. Okay, so I think I've addressed that. Oh, the RIPO. So we have a unit called the Regional International and Integration, RRID, and this was a unit that. So again, this talks now to when I said we wanted to realign. I said we're knocking off, or we've looked at the 50% in terms of the management structure of how we're cutting that. So under the new parts, so instead of having RRID as a single standalone unit, we thought let's just repackage this as a regional integration, but a production office or research office in terms of the functions that are there. So the projects all run through this. So it's basically taking what was there, bringing it, packaging under this unit called RIPO. Maybe I should just left it as RID, or the thinking should have been to leave it as that. But it was adding a few more elements to it that would control, and this then talks again to the structures that were internal of how we want to look at reporting lines and bringing this through this engine room, which looks at planning, monitoring, evaluation. So having all of these elements come through there. So that is just the thinking on that front. Okay, and then there's did I miss? Okay, I missed out so the financial aspects, the 100 million decline over the last 5 years, and looking at details of improving revenue. And I think now I've spoken to the multiplier effect on that one. So looking at while we do try, so we've got to look at niche areas. So while we're not competing, and therefore, at the end of the presentation, I was saying with the DTIC and working closely more recently with the likes of Nuntom Pedi and Irene, in terms of what we offer, and putting together that, it I think became very important. So yeah, I think our thanks should go, for to the DTIC there, Ntombi and Irene, for always being on hand to assist us and helping us to look at ways in which we can improve. So another question was based on the poisoning. So this is based on the Department of Health. So the Department of Health has that caretaking function there. We would provide, again, we get approached by the Department of Health. So when something is identified, or even if we identify something, then we can approach and say, no, we can provide this for you. We can provide these services, and we've improved that relationship now with the Department of Health in terms of the services that we can offer. So I think that in terms of what we can provide um, is there. So when we hear of something, we, like, for example, I'll give you another example, and maybe the one that happened in 2021 with those riots in KZN, and we hear, this is it. So we look at how we can now monitor, because it's air quality, because you've got a gas facility near Macro that exploded. So what is the air quality? So we worked with the likes of the local companies that were looking at air monitoring there. We provided them quickly with the reference materials that they can quickly, test the air quality. So those kind of things that, when it comes to us, what can we do? We act as quick as we can, or if we contacted, then we do. But again, it's an enabling function that we have this, and we try to keep our finger on the pulse where if something does happen, we then can put ourselves to say we can assist, but we should be front of mind. And I think that's where the awareness factor comes in, that we should be front of mind for all the institutes to know, listen, we can approach NMISA. And therefore, we were referring to, again, it comes back to when I say those steps for discussions that we had with the DTIC and looking at those medium to long term, where we look at SOE collaborations, where we look at government engagements. The DTIC has meetings with our strategic and business unit on I think it's every Monday. So they do have those discussions with them. So we look at marketing and how we can improve. Yeah. And I think then with the questions from the chair, I think I've then addressed the SANAS NRCS one, and maybe I can let the CEO come in terms of expansions, because he is very passionate in terms of our CFO is not just about financial aspects. He's very well clued up on the technical elements at NMISA as well, and maybe also take the question of the dislodging in terms of employees that resign and what's our front or our standpoint on that. Jay, if I can hand over to the CFO. CFO?
Yeah, thank you, Acting CEO. I think there's just a couple of questions that you have not covered. It's the issue around the 100 million and the increase of the operational expenditure. I think we were fortunate. We became unfortunate. We had 10 years of restructuring funds that we received from the DTIC to be able to purchase assets and have the necessary infrastructure to be able to house those assets. The unintended consequences is that it did require us to hire more officials to be able to work those machines. You would see on the slide as well, our rental shot up because we had to get the facilities to be able to house those equipment. So it's a basic increase based on the increased assets. We had an IT system that we procured. You are now paying more in maintaining that billion rands worth of asset book that you were able to procure. So you've got your maintenance costs that have increased there. In terms of the technical staff opening their own businesses, we did sort of have a discussion around that. From a metrology perspective, it's a little bit difficult for them because we are the only ones that can do measurement standards in terms of the Act. The issue of prioritization also plays into that because we don't necessarily set the agenda. We try to set ourselves up so that when the regulators like the NRCS or the Department of Health come to us and say, we have this challenge, can you give us a measurement solution? We are able to provide that solution. I think our biggest challenge is to be able to have the staff capacity that we've created so that we can offer the solutions. And I think lastly, just in terms of the SMME, I think that the acting CEO did cover it. We are at the high end, so we generally provide what the market doesn't provide. So when we had the issue of COVID coming in and you started having South Africans creating essential oils, there was no standards available in the country to be able to certify those standards. So we stepped up and developed the measurement standards to assist those SMMEs. I think the challenge that we also have is that the market is pretty democratized. So we are supposed to only play at the top. So if that market also grows big, the problem is that now the other labs will start playing in that space. And then what we'll then do is that we'll offer the market the standards, and then they will then provide the actual testing. We are not technically set up for a lot of the routine tests that are required in the services. So when we talk the spaza shops, we are not set up to be able to do the routine testing that will be required, but we are then set up to be able to say, can you give us a standard that says this is what will be in this product, in this cold rig, and in this product, and we're then able to provide it to the labs from Department of Health or the private labs that would then be able to do the routine testing that is required. Thank you, Chair. I think we've covered the majority of the questions.
Thank you very much. Can I check with honorable members if there's anything that is left out that you need to pick up? Otherwise, I think we have thoroughly engaged the institution, and I'm quite happy with the kind of work they're doing. And I'm sure that some of the questions that came from members, they will remain amongst the recommendations that we will make as the subcommittee. Are there any hands, Andre?
Mr. Chance, Chair, just raised his hand.
Honorable Chance, just very briefly, so that
Yes,
you can
very, very brief. Thank you, Chair. It was really aimed at Ms. Matamela regarding the multiplier issue, which I said was really more aimed at the DTIC from a strategy perspective. I don't know whether she has any comments to make on that.
I see she just left now.
I'm here, Chairperson. Sorry, I got disconnected.
Okay. Maybe.
With your permission, Chair, can we provide a written response on that question by by the Honorable Chance, Chair?
Just repeat that again. Hello?
I was asking with your permission, Chair, that we revert with a written response to Honorable Chance's question on the multiplier analysis, Chair.
Okay. Is that fine, Mr. Chance?
Yeah, that is actually preferable for me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, honorable members, the staff, and colleagues, and NMISA. The meeting is officially adjourned. Do we have any other business, Andre?
Chair, there's no other business, Chair. And Chair, if you can just stay for a minute or two on the platform, Chair, to discuss another matter. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. You are released. The meeting is officially adjourned.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Recording stopped.